Good evening, YouTube. Welcome back to the channel. This is iMac Sports with another football video, and today I'm going over my Week 17 Power Rankings for the 2023 NFL season. Only 2 more weeks left of this NFL year. We are officially at Week 17. So this used to be the last week of the season, but with the 17-game season, we have 2 more weeks of the regular season. Probably this had the most upsets of any week so far this season, which is a surprising thing to say considering how volatile this year has been. So let's get right into the power rankings. First off, as always, we have the dumpster fire. More changes here than there have been the last few weeks. There's been about 5 weeks in a row where it was the same. We have the Panthers at 32, plus or minus 0. The Washington Commanders at 31 with a -1 this week with their loss to the Jets. The Cardinals at -3 this week at 30 with their loss to the Bears, and the Patriots at 29 with their win over the Broncos, +1. Patriots have won 2 games recently, have won over the Broncos and a win over the Steelers. Bailey Zappe's been playing considerably better than Mac Jones was when he was the starter, and although we are no longer getting the #1 draft pick, it's nice seeing the team do well. As for the Cardinals offense has looked promising at some points in time, but even against the Bears, they can't really score, and it's just not as impressive as I expected it to be. They've moved back down to 30. As for Washington, they made a good effort against the Jets, but sadly, they increased their losing streak yet again. Moving on to bad defense, we have the Chargers at 28, the Giants at 27, the Titans at 26, and the Jets at 25. This was bad defense, and then I changed the teams in there, so this category is just bad. The Chargers gained +1 this week, and so did the Giants, just because the Cardinals fell below them. Both of those teams lost, but they lost with valiant efforts. The Chargers lost by 2 to the Bills. Easton Stick played a phenomenal game, and the defense actually gave Josh Allen some problems. As for the Giants, they played a very decent game against the Eagles. They were playing horrendously with Tommy DeVito, but Tyrod Taylor came in, he hyped up the team, he added some enthusiasm, and he gave the Giants one final punch to try and tie it up. But alas, it turned out to be pick. But they made it a very close game, which is respectable. Tennessee, -1 this week, down to 26. And Derrick Henry has been looking pretty good recently, but they ran into Seattle. Seattle obviously is fighting for a playoff spot. The Titans are not. And Seattle, they did play well against Seattle, but Seattle was a little bit of an over matchup for them. Derrick Henry had a passing touchdown and a rushing touchdown, but it was not enough. As for the Jets at 25, they gained 1 this week with their win over the Commanders. Not the best win in the world. They almost lost it. The Commanders scored 1,000,000 points in the 4th quarter. But yeah. 25 +1 I think is fair for the Jets this week. Moving on to the NFC Wild Card plus the Raiders. We have the Bears at 24, the Saints at 23, the Falcons at 22, the Packers at 21, and the Raiders at 20. The Bears lost 1 spot this week, down to 24. I know they did beat the Cardinals, but almost everyone in the bottom half of the power rankings won this week, so a lot of teams ended up losing spots even if they won. The Bears and the Packers, namely. So the Bears lost 1 spot. They're 6-9. I do think I had them a little bit overranked ahead of time before this week, but I think that the -1 is fair considering how many teams played so well this week. The Saints lost 3 positions with their loss to the Rams. I can't hurt them too much because the Rams are looking like one of the best teams in the league right now, so it's a tough game for the Saints to be up against, but they did an okay job. They only lost by 8. But a lot of that was comeback in the second half, and the Saints ended up weathering the storm. The Falcons are at 22. They lost 2 positions this week. Sorry, they gained 2 positions this week with their win over the Colts. Very impressive win. The Colts have been a tough team recently, and the Falcons are fighting for that spot in the NFC South. So they really needed the win this week, and they were able to do it. And not only do it, but they did it in convincing fashion. They beat the Colts 29-10. In a demolition of a game. The Packers are at 21. They lost 3 spots this week with their win over the Panthers. But that's not because they'd played poorly. That's because they were passed up by the Raiders, the Steelers, and the Seahawks. It really should be a -2 because if I had done a power rankings Monday night after the Seahawks game, then they would have been at 19 anyways. So it was effectively a -2, but it's only because they were passed up by other teams, and beating the Panthers by 3 is not a very impressive game. Beating the Panthers by 3 is almost like a loss at this point in the season. The Raiders gained 2 positions this week. They've moved up to number 20. Pretty decent game overall by the Raiders. They beat the Chiefs. Not decent. Better than decent. They beat Kansas City, and Kansas City didn't even do anything in the second half. They weren't even able to get anything going to try and make a comeback. The Raiders just controlled the game, and Aiden O'Connell's looked really decent at quarterback. They've looked okay with him, and they're on a 2-game winning streak after the losing to the Vikings 3-0. They demolished the Chargers last week, and they had a good divisional win over the Chiefs this week. So they're looking very strong after a couple weeks of being down in the dumps. They could definitely gain some more spots next week if they get another win. Moving on to wildly inconsistent. We have the Colts at 19, we have the Vikings at 18, we have the Broncos at 17, and we have the Steelers at 16. The Colts lost 4 spots this week with their loss to the Falcons. I contemplated putting the Raiders above the Colts, but I said not yet. That will be a question for next week, depending on how the Colts and the Raiders do for the final power rankings. The Colts have had a tough go at it trying to make it to the playoffs. They are now in a 3-way tie at 8-7, though, with the Jaguars and the Texans. So although they have been doing poorly recently, they're not doing as bad as Jacksonville. And now with a 3-way tie, there's anything that can happen in the last 2 weeks of the season. The Vikings are at ±0 this week, with a very solid game against the Lions. They got down early. They made a comeback. They almost looked like they had a chance to win. It was a decent game. So I think ±0 is fair. They've been at ±0 for a few weeks in a row. I think that they're just kind of stuck at 18 for the rest of the year. We have the Broncos at 17, -4 from last week. I really hyped up the Broncos a couple weeks ago, and they've just kind of been falling since then. It's too bad. I really hoped that they would be making the playoffs. I'm a big Russell Wilson guy, so it's just too bad that they're not fulfilling their destiny. And in that Patriots game, if they hadn't taken those timeouts and they just took it to overtime, there's no way we're scoring an overtime touchdown. They would have easily won that game if they had just taken it to overtime, but they got cocky, they took the timeouts, and we scored the field goal. As for the Steelers at 16, they gained 5 spots this week. The Steelers have been recovering from their loss against the Patriots, and the Broncos have just been hit by their loss against the Patriots. So 2 ships passing in the night. In their recovery process from their loss against the Patriots, the Steelers had a phenomenal win this week over the Bengals, 34-11. Very strong game. They've been looking a lot better with Mason Rudolph at quarterback than Mitch Trubisky. And if they play like this again next week, then they'll definitely be close to, if not in the top 10. Because the Mitch Trubisky weeks were really the weeks where they didn't look great. And if they can look as good with Mason Rudolph as they did with Kenny Pickett, then I think that the Steelers have a decent future this season going into the playoffs. Moving on to playoff caliber in 2023. This is an iffy category. We have the Bengals at 15, we have the Jaguars at 14, we have the Texans at 13, the Seahawks at 12, and the Buccaneers at 11. The Bengals lost 3 spots this week with their loss to the Steelers. It was a horrendous game. But yeah, I mean, one bad game isn't going to kill a team. And I think that overall, Jake Browning is going to be a good quarterback for this team for the rest of the season. If they lose another game next week and Jake Browning looks bad again, then I'll drop them more. But I think -3 is fair for one bad divisional loss. Jaguars lost 4 positions this week, with their 4th loss in a row. The Jaguars are trying to force the Texans and the Colts to take their spot in the playoffs. Jacksonville's doing anything and everything they can, and Trevor Lawrence looks like a mid-tier quarterback at best right now. He looks terrible. He's not playing well, and Jacksonville's losing a lot of games. They might not even make the playoffs at this point if they keep on this pace. Houston gained 1 spot this week, not because they did anything remarkable. They actually lost, but because other teams played worse. They lost this week, but it was a close game against a good team. It wasn't that close, but they made a comeback against the Browns. The Browns obviously demolished them. Joe Flacco's the second coming of, Jim Brown. And the Texans are doing decent overall. they really should have lost some positions this week, but there was nobody doing good enough to go above them. Everybody that won was at least 10 positions behind them. Everyone in the previous category lost except for the Steelers, and the Steelers already gained 5 spots, so I can't really bring them down anywhere. They played an okay game against the Browns, so +1's fine. As for the Seahawks, they're at +7 this week. Not because of their win this week, but because of their win over the Eagles. Again, because I do it before Monday Night Football, usually that can kind of mess up the rankings, but this week it won't because there were 3 Monday night games, and I decided to wait until after them. So Seattle gained 7 spots. Part of that was for beating the Eagles, and then part of that was for their win this week over Tennessee. The Eagles' win was super impressive. They played really well against Jalen Hurts, and it was an Eagles team that really found their groove and really said, hey, we need to beat a playoff team to make the playoffs. They had a rough go at it. They've possibly had the hardest schedule in the league, and I give them a lot of props. They were able to beat the Eagles in clutch time when they needed to, so that gave them a lot of credit. And then this week they beat Tennessee in another must-win game in order to be in the hunt for the playoffs. So a couple strong wins in a row brought them, and also Tampa Bay up to the number 11 spot. Tampa gained 5 spots this week with another phenomenal Baker Mayfield performance. Baker Mayfield is destroying teams. Baker Mayfield's perfect. Baker Mayfield will not lose. Baker Mayfield is the second coming of Tom Brady. And the Buccaneers are in position to win their division. They're in position to possibly win a playoff game, depending on who they're against in the NFC. Their offense is clicking on all cylinders, and their defense has gotten a little bit better. If Baker Mayfield can keep this up, then I'm optimistic for the rest of Tampa Bay's season. And Tampa and Seattle are just playing better than the Bengals, the Texans, and the Jaguars are at this moment in time. Moving on to the pretty okay teams. We have the Chiefs at number 10, the Rams at number 9, the Cowboys at number 8, and the Browns at number 7. This is not a jab. I'm not saying that they're bad. I'm saying they're okay. And okay is not a bad thing in the league this year. There's not a lot of good teams this season. And so okay is pretty good. Kansas City lost 2 spots for their loss to the Raiders this week. If Kansas City plays another even mediocre game next week, then they might drop out of the top 10. Even if they win, they might drop out of the top 10. Kansas City's playing horrendous right now. Kansas City's not playing good football, and they're losing a lot of games they should be winning. Kansas City looks awful, and it's been the whole second half of the season. They started off 6-1. They're now 9-6. They've won 3 of their last 8 games, and in their 3 wins, they were all against bad teams and they didn't even look good in any of the games. Kansas City's not impressing me right now, and they are the least of the top 10 right now. The Rams are at number 9. They gained 2 points this week. They're averaging 35 points a game with Kyren Williams. Not much to be said there. They're just playing great football week in, week out. Their offense is incredible. Kyren Williams is the best thing that this team has had since their Super Bowl win, and they're just going to keep going. They're just going to keep rolling. I like this Rams team right now. The Cowboys are at number 8. They lost 2 spots with their loss to the Dolphins this week. I know that there were some controversies in the game, but ultimately Dallas was unable to win in the game that was basically being said would decide who was a legitimate contender between the Cowboys and the Dolphins. Neither of them had a lot of games against legitimate contenders that they won. Obviously, the Cowboys played well in the Eagles game, but that's about it. So this was a -2 for them. They lost a couple spots with this loss because this was the telltale game. And Dallas was unable to do it at home. I picked Dallas because they were home, and they were unable to get it done in Dallas. If it was in Miami, it would be forgivable, but it was in Dallas, and that's a tough loss. I almost gave it to the Rams, but I'll wait until next week to see how the Rams do. The Browns are at number 7, +2. Joe Flacco is playing amazing football right now. Joe Flacco is clicking on all cylinders. Him and Amari Cooper are like peanut butter and jelly. Him and Amari Cooper are best friends, and Amari Cooper's catching 50-yard bombs every third pass from Joe Flacco. It's looking great right now in Cleveland, and they are one of the best teams in the league. Moving on to the strong contenders, we have the Lions at 6, the Bills at 5, the Eagles at 4, and the Dolphins at 3. I overcorrected on the Bills last week, I'll admit it. I brought them up way too high, But they are playing good football, and they had a tough game this week against the Chargers. I put them down 1 spot for it. But they did end up winning the game, so you can't hurt them too much. They're down to 5. The Lions gained 1 spot this week. A lot of people were mad I didn't give them a spot last week for their win over the Broncos, but really the Lions have not been playing up to their caliber recently, and I'm only putting them lower than they should be because I'm a critique of the team. I'm a fan of the team. Not because I think that they're bad, but because I am rooting for Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I expect the Lions to be better than they have been over the last few weeks. This was a great win over the Vikings. They did let them back in it a little bit, but it was a strong win overall, and I'm excited to see how they do against the Vikings again next week. Eagles are at 4. They lost 1 spot this week with their win over the Giants. Again, if you let Tyrod Taylor get the Giants back into the game, you're doing something wrong. And so the Eagles dropped down 1 spot. They lost 3 or 4 games in a row leading up to this week, and I almost put them all the way down at 6. The Eagles are falling apart right now. So I'm really not impressed with their 6-point win over the 8-point win over the Giants, whatever it was. We'll see how they do next week, but I'm tempted to put them all the way down at 6. Miami gained 2 spots up to number 3 with their win over the Cowboys this week in Dallas. 3-point game. Impressive win. That was the first win of the season for Miami against a team over 500. And the Dolphins are looking to get some momentum going into the playoffs. Last but certainly not least, we have the NFL's elite. We have the Ravens at 1. We have the 49ers at 2. This game was, it didn't come down to anything. The Ravens were just demolishing the whole time. Brock Purdy threw 4 interceptions. It was horrendous. I was against Brock Purdy in my fantasy league. I'm actually filming this before the game is over. So I'm hoping that he's not doing very well because I need him to do horrendous. But yeah, the Ravens, this was the game to decide it all. The Ravens won. And they are going to reap the rewards by being the number 1 team foreseeably for the rest of the season, because I can't really see anyone dethroning them unless they lose the game by 30. They've been the most consistent team in the league this season. They had a loss to the Colts early. They had a couple losses in the middle of the season to divisional rivals, but ultimately they've had the most consistent season. They have one of the best defenses in the last 10 years, and Lamar Jackson's an MVP candidate. So, thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.